Hello, kia ora, I'm Philip Duncan. Thank you for joining us for our weekend weather update and the outlook for next week, recorded on Friday, July the 18th. Low pressure has moved across the North Island overnight. There were a few thunderstorms here and there as it did so, although not in the last 6 hours since we recorded this. That low is moving out. You can actually see it spiralling here east of Northland and Auckland, northeast of East Cape, and a fair bit of cloud around with some morning rain and showers, and that gradually clears away. The South Island underneath clearer skies, lighter winds, frosty conditions again, and we're going to be seeing a number of frosts off and on over the next week. Been a while since we've actually said that this year, because most of the frosts have been fairly limited to the South Island and some parts of the North Island, and some areas have really not had many so far this year around the top of the country. Low pressure is out to the east tonight, southerly flow behind it, and high pressure building from the west. A small low developing off the coast of Queensland that is going to deepen into something else, but this big protective layer of high pressure keeps New Zealand mostly settled. As I said the other day, high pressure not necessarily over the top of us just yet, but that is going to change as we get into next week, and still plenty more stormy stuff south of us. In fact, a new storm is coming into Australia, as I've said this week. Doesn't look likely to pose too much of a threat to New Zealand, but it may bring in a bit of a westerly flow and some showers, perhaps in about a week's time. So let's have a look. Here is Saturday and Sunday's frost maps. Frosty weather again through the South Island, but this time ballooning out into the North Island, up into Bay of Plenty, Waikato as well. As we go into Sunday, perhaps a bit more of a breeze around, so the North Island perhaps not as frosty, but the South Island becomes frostier again. Not as frosty tomorrow morning as some places have been for the last couple of days, and that again is because we're not directly underneath high pressure, so there's still a bit of cloud, a few showers around, and perhaps a bit of a southerly wind. Now, to drill down deeper, if frosts are a big thing to you, gardeners in particular like this, go to the Rural Weather website or download the free app. Underneath trends, you'll see frost, and it shows much more detail than those frost maps I just showed you. That's just sort of a general big picture, but you zoom in, you can see here locally, this is for Hamilton coming up. So some frosty weather on the way into the top half of the North Island now. So noon Saturday, there is the cold polar line. So south of that, you've got the colder airflows from the Southern Ocean. That's why your temperatures are down and why the frosts are around. And that is creeping into the North Island, but still a few showers around the west. That's why parts of Waikato, a little bit borderline, but the further south you are, the more sheltered it will be. So frosts are likely. See what I mean? Like the South Island, not quite underneath high pressure. So we've got a few showers, a bit of cloud around. That's why the frosts are a little bit more perhaps hit and miss on Saturday. But on Sunday, there is the high drifting in closer, the winds fade out, so we see frost widespread through the interior of the South Island. And the North Island, because of a slight southeasterly breeze here on Sunday, that just slightly reduces that frost risk in some areas. Got a couple of showers in the east, maybe one or two even up here around the top part of the north. Otherwise, fairly dry on Sunday, and the winds, they're pretty light in most areas, maybe a little breezy around Wellington and some of the eastern coastal parts of the North Island. And we've got more frost risks on Monday. See how it expands back into the North Island once more, coming up towards Auckland. So keep an eye on that as we see our first kind of widespread frost of the year coming up into the top part of the country. For the South Island, business as usual. You've had a number of frosts over the recent months, but not so many in the coastal areas though. Once again, Christchurch, Dunedin at least low down towards sea level, and around to places like Invercargill, not as frosty, as most of those frosts are further inland and certainly around the mountains. So Monday, again, this is why you're not necessarily seeing frost for everyone, especially the coastal areas, as we start to sort of, on the edges of the high, still get these showers, southerly winds coming through. So you have to be in a sheltered area, away from the wind, away from the cloud, to get those frost risks as we go into Monday of next week. But either way, the placement of that high drops the temperatures down in many places. Certainly we don't have any kind of subtropical airflow at the moment. Speaking of the subtropics, Tuesday next week, here is this low forming right up around Fiji, and it's a tropical low up here, but as it drops down, it goes into the subtropical region. This big high pressure system very slowly moving into the country. Finally on Tuesday, it is over the top of the South Island. It will be by nighttime. The North Island on the outer edges of it, and between the low and the high, bit of a windy southeasterly. So again, reduces the chance of frosts. around the North Island, but keeps them in place in the South Island. And yes, that is the storm that is tracking along all the southern states of Australia from Sunday this weekend through until about the middle of next week. Here's the middle of next week, so it's subtropical storm by the looks of it there to the northeast of the country. But we've got this big high, 1030 hectopascals. It's just pushing away that low as it tries to come in. So that makes for a windy southeasterly, and it's colder too, because the right-hand side of high pressure, that's where it dredges up the southerly, and it's dragging it around and into the North Island. So you see that kind of cold airflow ballooning out around the North Island. It's cold southeasterly blowing for you on Wednesday. The South Island under high pressure, light winds, frosty start, beautiful day on the way for most regions. And by Thursday, the high still pretty much over the South Island, starting to slip off the south, a milder nor'wester forming for you. No change in the North Island. Sunny weather in a number of places though. Southeasterlies are quite sunny for places like Auckland and Waikato and Taranaki, Manawatu quite often as well, unless you get that cloud coming over the Manawatu ranges. That is possible because we do see a few showers. Won't be very warm for those of you along the eastern side of the North Island on Thursday next week. And by Friday, a week from now, that subtropical system, big kind of storm well out to our east of the Chatham Islands even. High pressure over us, cold mornings, pleasant afternoons, no great change. So that huge storm in the Southern Ocean, that is it here, being dragged back down, most of the energy going back down to Antarctica. So for us, we might get a bit of a westerly, especially on the back end of this high, likely to drive in some wet weather to the South Island. But for now, nothing too alarming is showing up. Rainfall for the next 7 days, not very much for most places. This is good news for a lot of regions. It gives us a good balancing act on the wet weather we've had. Now we get some dry stuff. So what you see here in the blue, bottom of the scale. So where you see it surrounded by the green and the yellow, bottom of the scale. The only area where we're seeing the purple and the blue is up around that subtropical system and the one out near Australia. So we're under high pressure, dry weather for the most part. A little bit of rain for Fiordland and Southwestland, not a lot. Perhaps a few showers coming into Canterbury, and obviously northern Hawke's Bay right up to East Cape getting clipped by those southeasterlies. Rainfall totals 40, 50, 60 millimetres there, and we've still got a few showers stuck around the Auckland, northern regions and grazing Waikato and Coromandel. That is all from me for this week. Have a great weekend. I'll see you again next week.